So we own the Great Simpson Desert, we own the Stony Desert over here, we own only deserts and waste and wetlands, that's all we own.
Yeah.
And also, in South Australia, we own a place, what they call Maralinga lands. Now we all, the infamous Maralinga, you know, that's all polluted with plutonium and all the byproducts of uranium.
Australia has the distinction of being the only country in the world to have supplied uranium for nuclear bombs, which its leaders allowed to be dropped by a foreign power on their own territory and their own people without warning. In the 1940s, the British were looking for somewhere to explode their new nuclear weapons. The central and western deserts of Australia were said to be ideal. Dr. Keith Locum, director of the Australian Radiation Laboratory, said, "There was the view in the back of everybody's mind that the land was unoccupied and likely to remain so. This view ignored the fact that an entire Aboriginal nation had lived on the land since before the arrival of Captain Cook. British history was conveniently repeating itself. More than 160 years earlier, all of Australia had been declared an empty land. At Maralinga and Emu Junction, between 1952 and 57, 9 nuclear bombs were exploded. Yami Lester was 12 at the time. His people received no warning.
This was early in the morning. I was up playing. Might have been around about 7. Sun was coming up, and it was a warm morning. And we heard this bang, and old people saying something, and when I heard the bang, and I just went on playing with other kids there. The black smoke come over, and I thought it was dust storm, but it was too quiet for dust storm. And that just rolling above the trees, then pass over, and then after that, I don't know how many days after, but most of the people were sick, and we all got skin rash and diarrhea and sore eyes and red eyes, and you couldn't open it, or you opened it and it was hurting, and tears and that, all that. And I believe that some people died because of we didn't have any proper treatment. There's no white doctors or white nurses there. That's happened, I think, 1953. Then 57, I went blind then.
In Britain and Australia, a propaganda campaign was mounted to justify the tests. This was the news of the world in May 1957. Tests will harm no one. In the Daily Express, Chapman Pincher wondered who were the real opponents of Britain's harmless bomb tests. Could it be those who hate or envy the British? Could it be Jap business tycoons who are using underhand methods to beat Britain in the export markets? For many years, the Aboriginal people tried to tell the world what had really happened in Australia, but few listened. It was only when British and Australian servicemen who had worked on the tests began to suffer and die from cancers that the full horror of the bombs began to emerge. Finally, in 1984, the Australian government agreed to a Royal Commission. Patrick Connolly, who served at Maralinga with the Royal Air Force, said, "Occasionally we would bring the Aborigines in for decontamination. Other times, we just shoot them off like rabbits." Australia has offered its sovereignty to other countries while denying it to the Aborigines. The Americans today have a number of spy bases which are theirs to do as they wish. Here is the American ambassador accepting one of the bases almost as right.
Now, our friendly Australian landlords haven't yet demanded their rent. But we Americans want to always be good tenants. We want you to know that we pay our bills promptly. Here then, Mr. Prime Minister, I want to present you with one peppercorn payment in full for the first year's rent. I thank you very much.
Near Alice Springs and its sacred Aboriginal sites is the Pine Gap base, which tells the Americans what the Russians are doing in Europe. Not surprisingly, the Russians have indicated that Pine Gap is a prime nuclear target. A peppercorn is therefore a bargain price to pay for positioning Australia in the front line of a nuclear war on the other side of the world. The Prime Minister, Bob Hawke, has projected himself, or rather his media image, as truly a man of all the people. Indeed, when he came to power, his Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, Clyde Holding, spoke of land rights as a restitution for white Australia's genocidal past, a final healing of the wounds. A National Land Rights Act was to be drafted at last, one, it was hoped, without strings to snatch the land back. But mining was the catch. During the 1984 election campaign, powerful mining interests conducted an openly racist campaign which included TV commercials with a black wall built across Western Australia. In October, in the critical weeks before the election, the state's Labor Premier, Brian Burke, met Prime Minister Hawke. They talked about the problem of land rights and marginal seats and of being fair to mining interests. After the meeting, Hawke effectively cancelled Labor Party policy which would have given Aborigines the right to control resources on their own land. A starring role is said to be Bob Hawke's dream for the 1988 bicentenary celebrations, which for the Aborigines may well be a nightmare. This was Botany Bay in 1970. On the other side of the water, the whites were celebrating yet again the coming of Captain Cook. At the next celebrations, the Aborigines may not be satisfied simply with expressing their grief.